So now we are going to explore section 4, which is the cultural of classical Greece. Classical Greece, especially Athens under Pericles' rule, witnessed a period of remarkable intellectual and cultural growth that became the main source of Western culture. Aristotle, Socrates, and Plato established the foundation of Western philosophy. First is Greek religion. Religion affected every aspect of Greek life, considered religion necessary to the well-being of the state. Temples dedicated to gods and goddesses were the major building in Greek cities. Greek religion was fundamental to Greek society, as is remembered today for the Olympic Games and Greek drama, which were part of the religious festival. The Greek gods and goddesses were known as the Olympians because the Greek believed they made their home on Mount Olympus. Next is Greek gods and goddesses. The Greeks believed the Olympic gods were descended from the Titan. Zeus was the chief god, the father of the of gods. He was represented by Cronus and Rhea. The lightning as his weapon of choice was sons of Cronus and Rhea. The lightning bolt were Hades was the god of the underworld. Zeus' brother, he was envious of Zeus' rule on Mount Olympus, while Poseidon was the god of the sea and earthquakes. He is represented by horse as his gift to mankind. Then Homer described the gods worshipped in the Greek religion. The 12 chief gods and goddesses were thought to live on Olympus, the highest mountain in Greece. Among the 12 were Zeus, Mao ang chief god and father of the gods, si Athena, goddess of wisdom and craft, while si Apollo, god of the sun and poetry. Then si Artemis, the sister of Apollo, who was the god of the moons and of the hunt. Then while Ares, god of war, si Aphrodite, goddess of love, and Poseidon, brother of Zeus and god of the seas and earthquakes. Very little religious doctrine, humans needed to please the gods who could control them. The Greeks performed rituals in temples upon altars. They sacrificed also animals and made gifts of wood, rituals and ceremonies of rites. Then the afterlife was gloomy, but the Elysian fields were available to those who lived at the exemplary life. 3 Greeks held many festivals to honor the gods, including holding the Olympics. Now, oracle. An oracle is sacred shrine where a god or goddess revealed the future through a press or treatise. The Greeks would ask the oracle question and receive answer channeled through the gods or goddesses' press or presbyteries. The most famous of all the oracle was the Oracle of Apollo, located in Delphi. The oracle responses to questions were interpreted by priests and given in verse or poetic form in the questionnaire. Heads of the state often traveled to Delphi to consult with the oracle. Often, the oracle responses could be puzzling and difficult to figure out. For example, si Croesus, the king of Lydia, was told that if he attacked the Persian, he would destroy a mighty empire. When he attacked the Persian, he can lose his entire empire to the Persians. Classical Greek arts and literature. Greece produced breaking arts and literature that is still considered relevant. The arts of Western world have been largely dominated by the standard set of the Greeks of the classical period. First, the architecture and culture. In architecture, the most important form was the temple, dedicated to sa mga god o sa goddesses. At the center of Greek temples were walled rooms that housed both the statues of deities and treasures in which gifts to the gods and goddesses were safeguarded. Some of the finest examples of Greek classical architecture were built sa Athens in the 5th century BC. The most famous building on the Acropolis, the Parthenon, is regarded as a great example of the classical Greek temple. It was built between 447 BC and 432 BC. Dedicated to Athena, the patron and goddess of Athens, the Parthenon was the expression of Athenians' pride in their city-states. And sculpture, Greek sculpture also developed a classical style, lifestyle fetish on male, mga nude. They are more, or mga, ang ilang sculpture, they are mga nude subject. The favorite subject of Greek sculpture showed relaxed attitude. Their faces were self-assured, their bodies smooth and muscle. Classical Greek sculpture did not seek to achieve realism, however, but rather a standard of ideal beauty. Polykleitos, a 5th century sculptor, wrote down a systematic rule for proportion that he illustrated in a work known as Dorifurus. Next is Greek drama. Greek created drama as we know it today. They wrote and acted plays in outdoor amphitheaters. The first Greek plays were tragedies, were usually presented in a trilogy. Instead of three plays, think of the great trilogies we see in film today. Those stories are based on a concept nearly 50,000 years old, and male actors were all allowed in the theaters. Greek playwright Sophocles wrote Oedipus Rex, the story of Oedipus. In this story, the Greek playwright Oracle Apollo at Delphi predict Oedipus will kill his own father and marry his mother. Aeschylus wrote tragedies. He is the author of the only trilogy that was, despite all the attempts to prevent past and complete from the Greek. This Oedipus does kill his father and go on to marry his mother. A story he wrote, the Oresteia, the story of misunderstanding mistaken Agamemnon, a hero of the Trojan identities and tragedy, war and his family after his return from the war. Europe, Euripides was also a playwright in Greece. He wrote realistic characters and stories, but he was controversial because he used his plays to question traditional values and nature of good and evil. The writing history. In Western world, the Greeks were the first people to present history as systematic analysis of past events. Herodotus wrote history of the Persian War, often seen as the first real history in Western civilization. Its central theme in the conflict between the Greeks and Persians, which Herodotus viewed a struggle between Greek freedom and Persian despotism. Herodotus traveled ideally and questioned many people as means of obtaining his information. He was a master of storyteller. Next is Thucydides, or Thucydides, the greatest historian of the ancient world. Thucydides was an Athenian general who fought in the Great Peloponnesian War and later wrote his history, unlike Herodotus. Thucydides saw war and politics as the activities of human beings, not gods. He examined the Peloponnesian War thoroughly and thoroughly, placing much emphasis on accuracy. Next is Greek philosophy. Philosophy refers to organized system of thought. The term comes from a Greek word that means love of wisdom. Early Greek philosophers focused on the development of critical or rational thought about the nature of the universe. Many early Greek philosophers tried to explain the universe on the basis of unifying principle. And as in the century BC, for example, Pythagoras, families to geometry students praised Pythagorean theorem, thought that the essence of the universe could be found in music and numbers. Sophists. The Sophists were a group of traveling teachers in ancient Greece who rejected speculation such as that Pythagoras as foolish. They argued that it was simply beyond the reach of human mind to understand a universe. It was more important for individuals to improve themselves. Then the Sophist goal was to argue effectively, not to promote particular beliefs or ideas. They were known for their ability to argue for both sides of an issue. To Sophists, were they were absolutely right, or was the right for the individual might be wrong for another. Yes. Next is Socrates. Socrates was a sculptor who loved philosophy. He left no writing behind. What we know of Socrates was from the writing of his students. Socrates used a teaching method that is still used today and is named after him, the Socratic method. We are all familiar with Socratic method. Uses question and answer to lead students to see things for themselves by using their own reason. Socrates believed all knowledge is already present in each person and could be brought forth with the right question. Socrates believed that an examined life is not worth living, and that individual ability to think and reason was one of his most important contributions to philosophy. Socrates liked to question authority, which led him to trouble with the Athenian government. After the Peloponnesian War, the Athenians were not as open to public debate. Socrates was accused of corrupting the youth of Athens by teaching them to think for themselves. Socrates was sentenced to death by a jury. He drank a poison hemlock and died. Next is Plato. We are all familiar with Plato, was a student of Socrates. Plato is considered to be one of the greatest philosophers of Western civilization. Plato was a prolific or extensive writer. He was fascinated by the study of reality and endeavored to answer the question, like how do we know what is real? Plato believed higher world exists in which the form existence could never change. He believed this form were made of reality and that only a trained mind could become aware of and understand this higher form. And to Plato, things we perceive with our own senses are just reflection of our ideal forms. So a tree really represents the higher form of treeness. Plato Republics. Plato explained his ideas about government in a work called The Republic. Plato did not think democracy was the best form of government. Plato did not think and he believed people need to live in a just and rational state in order to achieve a good life. Democracy did not suit achieving a good life, according to Plato. Plato's ideal state was one in which people were divided into three groups. First, the philosopher king, the upper class, they would rule based on wisdom, the middle political power, which philosophy, so that the ruler would make the best choices or mankind. Ang second is the warriors made of the second class and were responsible for protecting society. The masses made up sa third group and consisted of people not driven by wisdom or courage, but instead tried to meet their own desires. These people included those who produce art, tradespeople, and farmers. The masses made up the third, and Plato believed men and women should have the same education and access to all positions, set him apart from other men of his era. Next is Aristotle. Aristotle was a student of Plato. Plato established a school known as the Academy. Aristotle studied at the academy for 20 years. Aristotle did not accept Plato's theory of ideal form. Aristotle thought that by examining objects we could perceive their true form, but unlike Plato, he did not believe that this form existed in separation or higher world of reality. Aristotle analyzed and classified things based on observation and investigation, and he wrote about many subjects, including ang ethics, logic, politics, poetry, astronomy, biology, geology, until the seventh and physics until the 17th century. Most science was based on Aristotle's ideas and classification. Aristotle also wrote about government. He wrote a work titled Politics that described three ideals of government depending on the people, which are monarchy, aristocracy, and constitutional government. Aristotle believed a constitutional government was the best form of most people. Next, we are going to explore section 5, which is Alexander and the Hellenistic era. Philip and Alexander. Philip II came to the throne He built a powerful army and turned Macedonia into chief power of the Greek world. Philip was soon drawn into Greek affairs. A Greek admirer of Greek culture, he longed to unite all the Greeks under Macedonia. Fearing Philip, the Athenians allied with a number of other Greek states and fought the Macedonians at the Battle of Chaeronea. Near Thebes in 388 BC, the Macedonian army crushed the Greek. Philip quickly gained control of Greece, bringing an end of the freedom of the Greek city-state. He insisted that the Greek state form a league and then cooperate with him in a war against Persia. Before Philip could undertake this invasion of Asia, however, he was assassinated, leaving the task to his son Alexander. See, Alexander the Great is the son of Philip. Uh, was only 20 when he became a king of Macedonia. Philip had carefully prepared his son of a kingship by taking Alexander along with on military campaign. Philip taught Alexander the basics of military leadership. After his father's death, Alexander moved quickly to fulfill his father's dream, the invasion of the Persian Empire. He was motivated by the desire for glory and empire, but also by the desire of avenge the Persian born of Athens in 480 BC. The Empire of Alexander the Great. Alexander conquest. Alexander was taking a chance in attacking the Persian Empire. Although weakened, it was still a strong state in the spring of 334 BC when Alexander entered Asia Minor with an army of some 37,000 men, both Macedonians and Greeks. The cavalry, which would play an important role as striking force, numbered about 5,000. By the next year, Alexander had freed the Ionian Greek city of Western Asia Minor from the Persian and defeated a large Persian army at Issus. And then he then returned to the south by the winter around 332 BC. Alexander had Syria, Palestine, and Egypt under his control. He built Alexandria as the Greek capital of Egypt. Then it became and remains today one of the most important cities in both Egypt and the Mediterranean world. It was also the first of a series of cities named after him. Over the next 3 years, Alexander moved as a modern far as a modern Pakistan. In 326 BC, Alexander reached the India where the campaigning was hard. When his soldier refused to go farther, he agreed to go home. He led his troops across the desert of today's southern Iran. Many were dying of heat and thirst. At one point, some soldier found a little water and offered it to him. According to ancient Greek writer, Alexander poured into the ground. So extraordinary was the effect of his action that the water wasted by Alexander was as good as drink for every man in the army. Alexander returned to Babylon, planning more conquests, but in 323 BC, exhausted from wounds, fever, and too much alcohol, he died. He was only 32 years old. Alexander's legacy. Alexander's extraordinary success is explained by his leadership and military skills. He was a master of strategy and tactics, able to fight in all terrains and all against gods of opponents. Brave and even reckless, he risked his own life, an example that inspired his soldiers to follow him. Alexander sought to imitate Achilles, the hero of Homer Iliad. He kept a copy of the Iliad and a dagger under his pillow. Alexander created an enormous legacy. He extended Greek and Macedonian rule over a vast area, which brought a large quantities of gold and silver into their economies. Alexander's successor tried to imitate him using force and claims of divine rule to create military monarchies. Although mainland Greeks remained committed to the ideals of the city-state, the creation of monarchies became a part of Alexander's political legacy. The Alexander also left a cultural legacy due to his conquest Greek language, architecture, literature, and art spread throughout Southwest Asia, Central Asia, and parts of North Africa. The Greek also absorbed aspects of entire culture.